you ever wondered where you really stand with God? Are you overcome with feelings of guilt because of things you've done wrong? Are you tired of religion that focuses on rules that you can't keep? Have we got good news for you? It's time to listen in on some casual conversation with Mike Kapler and Joel Brueseke and discover what true freedom is all about. This is Growing in Grace.
Okay, time to let our hair down and relax. Take a little breather from life and focus on the goodness of God's love for you and me. We're talking about the gospel, the good news. I'm Mike Kapler, Joel Brueseke with me here on Growing in Grace.
Man, in this heat and humidity, it's hard to let my hair down. It gets all frizzy. I just got the type of hair.
I've always had that problem, but I'm having an even bigger problem with that these days. Letting my hair down isn't going to happen anymore, I don't think.
But it is good to take a deep breath and get a breath of fresh air and enjoy the goodness of God and the gospel and everything that He has provided for us. And that's kind of what we're doing here on Growing in Grace week after week. And we've been taking some time, Cap, over the last few weeks, and maybe we'll spend a little bit more time on this, a few more weeks maybe, on what we're calling game changers. Things that, well, you know, maybe at one point in our Christian life we saw things one way. Maybe we were taught things a certain way, perhaps kind of legalistically, or maybe we ourselves might have even just that's the way we interpreted things when we read the Bible, based upon what else we'd been taught. But then suddenly you read something, you hear something, and the lights go on, and a light flashes over your, a light bulb appears over your head, and yes, I get it now. I see things differently. Eureka! And it just provides just a breath of fresh air for you, and you're relieved, and you're able to enter more and more into that rest that God has promised us. And so we're going to be talking about some more of these game changers this week.
Yeah, one thing that I think we're going to have to do, Joel, is go back and listen to these programs that we've been calling game changers, and put the bullet points down on a piece of paper so we can kind of go through them real fast, maybe when we're done on this little game changer series that we're doing, because it would be kind of nice just to have a list of them. We're trying not to spend a ton of time elaborating on them because they are, by and large, they are things that we've talked about in our broadcasts over the years. But here we are with these little nuggets that did bring some real changes into our thinking and into our lives. And so but that's something I think we ought to do is list them out.
That would be a really good idea. I think we could, like you say, take some time, listen to the programs, bullet points, just kind of highlight the points that we made and somehow make that available to people. Yeah, definitely something to do.
Starting with me. Make it available to me first, then you, then everybody else.
You were the one that was going to be making the list.
And then the last shall be first. That's why I'm going first, so I can be last.
All right, and you'll get the last laugh. Even though these things are funny.
Right
We're serious here, man. We're serious. Well, anyway, some serious stuff. Cap, have you ever read the Old Testament? some of those stories. I think it was. I can't think. Malcolm Smith, I think, one time, I can't remember his exact quote, but he said, if, you don't need to watch soap operas on TV, just read the Old Testament if you want some high drama and some adultery and some murder and things like that. Really, just pick up the Old Testament and start reading, and you're guaranteed to find some of this stuff. And so that's kind of our first point this week here on Game Changers, is that, one thing that really just changed things for me is when I realized that there were people like David, King David, Noah, Abraham even, the father of our faith. These people who did some pretty nasty things to other people. And yet they were included either in Hebrews 11 Hall of Faith as people of faith, or somehow in the Bible were credited as being people of great faith, a man after God's own heart. That's what David was called. Peter denied Christ, and so many times you look at Peter's life and you think, man, he just doesn't get it. He wasn't getting what Jesus was trying to show him, and Jesus stuck with him, stayed with him, didn't leave him, didn't forsake him. In fact, handed him over the keys to the kingdom, so to speak, as he called it. And all these people, Rahab the harlot, she's listed in Hebrews 11 as the harlot Rahab. She's listed as a person of faith. So it just amazes me that some of these people could do some pretty nasty things and yet be credited with great faith in the Bible.
Yeah, the Old Testament. You're right about the soap opera thing. I think that lies, deceit, people who never seem to work, unhappy marriages, and the list goes on. And of course, the Old Testament is often so misunderstood by many, including myself.
Mm-hmm.
Thank goodness for the new covenant. But you're right. In Hebrews chapter 11, this could be a game changer for somebody out there to come to the realization that the writer in Hebrews, talking about this new covenant, comparing it to the old throughout most of the book, and then taking time out here in Hebrews 11 to point out some of these people, as you said, Joel, Rahab the harlot. I mean, even identifying her that way tells you something. But she's in the hall of faith. David the murderer, the adulterer, Moses the murderer, and the list goes on. And these are just some of the people that, that what they didn't necessarily affect faith, mm-hmm. and who they really were. David, the man after God's own heart. I mean, even though he made mistakes, and some of them were big ones, mm-hmm. probably at least as big as anything that you've ever done, just think about that. I mean, and the reason this is so important, Joel, is because there are a lot of people, I was one of them, I'll bet you were, in fact, I'll bet most of the people listening, at least at one time in their life, were in the same mentality, the same position in their thinking. And that is, I've done something wrong. I'm now not sure where I stand with God. God is going to be angry at me. I'm not going to be able to receive the blessings that God has for me because of how I let him down, how I blew it, how I did the wrong thing. And then they never really experience the fullness of the life of Christ. I mean, the life of Christ, it's there. It's just that they never really are able to experience it the way God would like them to.
Mm-hmm. Yep, indeed. And it's just, that is definitely a mindset that we really do need to change in the church today, because so many people, like you say, Cap, and I was like this, and like you said, you were like that, and got this mindset that when we do something wrong, that God is suddenly against us, that we've got to get back, quote, into his good graces, which is an oxymoron, and it's that we've got to somehow make ourselves right with him again, or he's going to have his face turned from us. I even saw somebody on Facebook just yesterday or today saying that, if you're living in sin, then you're not going to be able to hear from God. But that's not the point. That misses the point of the gospel, that we've all done some pretty nasty things, some nastier than others, but God remains faithful to us, because our behavior, while he may or may not be, quote, pleased with some of the things that we do, it doesn't affect the fact that we are his beloved children, that he loves us more than we can even imagine, and that he never leaves us. He never turns his back on us, even when we do stuff like, even if we did some of the stuff like what David did, or Abraham, or Rahab the harlot, or Peter denying Christ, and all this stuff. He never turns his back on us, because he is so faithful and so full of grace, far beyond what we can imagine. And so we need to get this mindset right, that he's for us, even when we've messed up.
Yeah, and these were people who were, under the old covenant too. I mean, Christ had not died, and righteousness had not been revealed yet, the righteousness of God by faith. And you mentioned Abraham, Joel. I mean, you talk about a guy making a big mistake. I mean, if it hadn't been for Abraham's mistake, we wouldn't have many of the problems in the world today that we see between Israel and other nations, and I don't want to get into details about this. I don't want to get into a political discussion. I'm just saying one of the reasons why the world is not experiencing any kind of real peace is because of the mistake that Abraham made with thinking that he was going to take things into his hands. God made him a promise, and Abraham thought, well, I want to be a doer of the word, and so Abraham took it upon himself to try to fulfill that promise that God made to him, and so that was a big mistake.
Yep, Abraham made that mistake, and even the lying when a couple different times when he went into a different country and lied about his Sarah being his wife, also that he could save his own butt. Basically, he lied to save himself, and it worked, but yet. I'm just the point being, he got found out, but I mean, in the end, everything was okay. But still, the point being that he did some pretty nasty things, and David sending Bathsheba's husband to the front lines of war purposely to make sure that he got killed. That's not a very nice thing. But yet, and I don't think God was happy with that. I think the Bible even says that it displeased the Lord. But just because our actions may not line up with the reality of who we are in Christ and might not line up with, righteousness and holiness as far as it being lived out, that doesn't mean that God is turning on us or anything like that. Well, Cap, we said we wanted to just kind of go through some of these things quickly. I think this one in particular we spent more time on, but we've got some other things to talk about as the weeks go on, kind of relating to some of this. And I think, real quickly, I'll just end with this one. Several years ago, Cap, this is what revolutionized my life. And, I've shared this story on our program before, and Cap, you were a big part of this because back in the day, you and me, when I was still kind of in that legalistic mindset, you were learning about grace, and we would have these conversations at the radio station that we used to work at, just kind of, you would just be sharing little nuggets of grace with me, and a lot of it was sinking in. Some of it was I was pondering. I don't even remember the exact content of some of those conversations, but one of those conversations that stuck out to me, you were talking, saying various things, then all of a sudden, just as part of the conversation, you said, God isn't angry with you anymore. And that, just that's when one of those light bulbs went off in my head. God is not angry with me. It's one of those things where I knew it. I knew that in a sense that he wasn't angry with me because I knew about God's grace. I knew that he was love and all these things, but I didn't really get that he wasn't angry with me. He was full of love toward me and grace and mercy and kindness. He is for me, not against me. That's something that you've said on our program a lot, Cap, that God is for you. And so, that thing right there, God, despite everything we've ever done, God is not angry with us. He's for us. That's a game-changing thing for me, Cap.
All right, so we'll talk more about that next week. I realize some of the legalists who tune into our program, they're probably going to be mad that we're going to be talking about this subject again. But we'll hit on that and some other game changers next week here on Growing in Grace.
This has been Growing in Grace with Mike Kapler and Joel Brueseke, heard online through various internet sources around the world each week. To access hundreds of past programs, visit graceroots.org. Share it with a friend and listen again next week for more Growing in Grace.